Hi, I'm Ruth McD with Real Life with Ruth McD, and I'm glad that you are joining us today. My guest today is Jeffrey Ortiz, and he is a marriage and relationship therapist, licensed and certified and all those words. In other words, he knows what he's doing. But he is here to share his story, and I'm excited to have you here because a lot of times we know of counselors and therapists, and they don't always share their story because they're busy gathering everybody else's story. So this is really interesting that Jeff not only works in counseling and therapy the way that we know it to be if we were in the secular arena, but he brings Jesus into the whole picture and changes everything. So let's go ahead and get started. You are an implant, I was going to say, but you're not an implant. You're a transplant.
Transplant, yes. My wife and I moved here about 2.5 years ago to Middle Tennessee from California, like most of Middle Tennessee.
You're right. We've got a lot of Californians. It's what's funny is I knew your wife right after they all had moved here and started coming to our church. We go to church together. And I did not know who you were forever until you got up one day and he's got this little puppet Jeff. And then you're Jeff.
Yeah.
And then later I found out, the connection and everything. I'm like, oh, that's who you are. And then I was friendly with you after that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you are here and you do a lot of counseling and coaching and therapy, and you also do services. You speak at services and conferences and that kind of thing.
All that.
And so what does your day typically look like? Because a lot of us are very informed on counselors, whether it's for ourselves or family members, but what does it look like? Do you just sit behind your desk all day and let people talk to you?
Well, at times, yes. And then a lot of times it's telehealth, so remotely.
Oh, yeah.
So I've stepped more into the coaching realm. So I am licensed in the state of California, but working more with relationships and building stronger connections between couples. And so that allows me to work anywhere, like with anybody, as opposed to just being, if I'm working in the clinical realm, then I can only work with people in the state of California. So this gives me a broader sense to be able to work. And so if they need clinical help, then, I'd encourage them to seek out somebody in their area, or if I know somebody in where they're at, then I'll refer them to them. But the coaching realm has allowed me to really broaden, how I work with people. It's also allowed me to do it in different settings. So do a lot of group work. Did several groups last year with men in building stronger connections with men and their circles of life, wives, kids, families. So giving them the tools to be able to do that. So, and then speak at churches, various churches and that sort of thing. So like a typical day, just depends. Sometimes I have them come to my house. We work out of the front office, or it's a Zoom session, remote session, something like that. So,
all right. So I got to ask, do you have a special couch?
Well, I have a couch. I don't know if it's special, but it's a couch.
All the jokes, from years ago all the way up, it's been that couch. But I think it's changed to the computer. I don't know. I'm just saying that.
A special computer. Just one. The same one.
So it's a known fact that every counselor has their own story, and you have a story, but we all have a story.
That's right.
And yours is a very interesting story. And let's have that question answered first. Did it lead you to become a therapist, or? It
did, absolutely did. Because if you would have asked me when I was a teenager or younger, what I was going to do for a living, it definitely wasn't going to be a counselor or a coach in the capacity of building stronger relationships. Because the truth is, I didn't really like people.
That's
mostly because I didn't trust them. It's one of those things where you grow up in an environment where you get hurt, and so then you put up walls and you don't trust people. And so as much as I loved and wanted to be around people, I didn't fully let them in.
Gotcha.
And so
that happens a lot.
Absolutely. And so for the record, I'm actually a relationship coach that's gone through a divorce, as a matter of fact. So in my late 20s, early 30s, I went through a divorce. And that's really what got the ball rolling, where the Lord, He got a hold of my life. I grew up in the church. Probably at the age of 10, we started going to church, and always went to church my whole life. I knew everything about God, all the right things to say, all the stuff. But it wasn't until I surrendered my life and said, okay, God, I'm tired of carrying all this baggage that I've been carrying. I just want to be free. And I want to be free to be me. And whatever that looks like, I was tired of putting on the mask.
Yeah.
And so in being all these things that everybody else wanted me to be, I was just tired of doing that. And that got the ball rolling.
So you talk about the baggage that you were carrying. What did that look like?
I always say it's guilt, shame, hurt, and pain. You know, all the things that people hurt me, relationships that hurt me in my past, and insecurities. Growing up, the fat kid, all through my life, especially the younger years. Growing up with a mom that we weren't on the same page. She was a tough one to deal with at times, and so I became the black sheep of the family, and so I was the one who was always the problem. And so because I was always the problem, so I'm like, I might as well be the problem. And so I just carried that with me. And so if I wasn't, let's just say, putting people down, I was making them laugh. So one way or the other, I was just trying to find my place and fit in. And so I consider myself a recovering people pleaser. And so, you know, what that looks like is just that, like, where can I fit in? What can I do to get people to like me and be accepted? And so that I spent my whole life doing that, and I'm in recovery now. And so it's figuring out ways to make sure I ask myself the question, is this something that I want to do, or am I doing it because they want me to do it? And so it's towing that line all through, you know, for the rest of my life, I'll be doing that. And so it's recognizing, you know, that I can do the things that I want to do, and I can say no to the things that I don't want to do, setting those healthy boundaries.
So where did that start?
So I would say at the age of 30, going through the divorce, God started showing me some things that were definitely weighing down on me, and definitely keeping me from being who I am. And so I would say, like, the guilt, explaining guilt and shame. So guilt for the things that I did, the bad things I did, and shame for the bad person I am. And so it was a matter of, okay, what parts do I need to surrender to the Lord and ask full forgiveness? And forgiveness from myself, forgiveness from God, and then forgiveness from the people that I've hurt or wronged. And so, because I hurt plenty of people along the way. My boys in their younger years, my ex-wife, just my siblings, my two sisters. You know, there's plenty of people that can go around. You know, I was a knucklehead. The best way to say it. Really, what I was doing is I was projecting the hurt and the pain that was inside out to everybody else, because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to heal it. And so I was just trying to contain something that was uncontainable, and it would just explode out.
So where did that start, that you really felt people were hurting you and you were having to figure out how to get back at them, or how to protect yourself, or how to build a wall, or how to, where was?
I would probably say adolescence, probably somewhere between 7 to 10 years old.
Now, was that when you were putting the weight on? Or?
Exactly. Yeah. And so getting made fun of, like, I played sports, and sports were, like, I would consider my saving grace, like my way to escape. Go to play on the ball field, and I was good enough athletically that kids wouldn't always make fun of me for my weight, but eventually they would. And then at school, you know, we've all been to school, and if we look different,
kids can be cruel.
And if we look different, it doesn't matter if you're overweight or you have, you know, crooked teeth, or your hair this, or, you know, whatever it is, kids will find a way to put you down. So that was my thing. And so, like, then I would start putting up boundaries or putting up walls, and not allow myself to really engage with certain people, or I'd push people away with my anger. And, you know, that was one way.
So you got angry about it.
Yeah. So it depended on who it was. So if I wanted to be friends with them, I'd use sense of humor. But if I didn't like them, then I would get angry and keep them at a distance.
Interesting.
So sense of humor, come in, right? Connection in, but anger, you know, protect myself, build space, and say, okay, no, you stay over there. I'm going to be over here.
Interesting. Already there's a lot of maneuvering, even at that young age.
It's about survival, right? And so you have these instincts inside of you. You don't know that as a kid. Nobody's teaching you these things. But instinctually, you're like, I got to protect myself one way or the other. And I think God's with us the whole time. And he's trying to protect us from things we don't really know a lot about.
Yeah.
And so instinctually, we do these things to keep ourselves safe. The problem is when we grow up with those same instincts and we haven't healed them,
Yeah.
and they come out on the people that we really care about and love. That's where it becomes problematic.
So you continued this then through high school and college?
High school for sure. And then, I discovered the game of American football and started lifting weights, exercising, changed my physical body. But inside, I still felt like I was a fat kid. I mean, even to the point where my buddy and I were lifting weights one day. I think we had just graduated high school. And I remember him calling me a fat boy. And I was like, I looked at him and I got super upset. And he's like, why are you so mad? He's like, it looks like you want to punch me. And I'm like, I do. And he's like, but you're not fat. And it clicked in my head. I'm like, this is crazy that I still feel like I'm the fat kid. And so even though I physically changed, inside I was still the hurt fat kid. So I carried that with me all through teenage years, getting married. Actually had my first son before we got married. He was 3 when we did get married. And in that relationship, I could say that I didn't love my wife the way that Christ wanted me to love her. And so there was a lot of deficiencies and a lot of things that I missed altogether in loving her in the way that Christ wanted me to love her. That being a young 20-year-old with all this hurt and this pain and this.
So you're still carrying it at that point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All through that relationship, I carried it. Now I tried to do the right things and be the man, but when it got to a point where I didn't know how to communicate, feeling disrespected, I didn't know how to communicate it. And so it would just build up, and then I would just explode. But that's what I saw growing up. I saw a lot of explosion in my home. So I was like, oh, well, I can do that and it's okay. Here, my parents are still married. They're not going to get a divorce, And so I thought it was just acceptable. Come to find out it's not. And to her credit, like she at some point she had to set a boundary and say, hey, look, this is unhealthy. And so, we tried to do the counseling a couple times, but I didn't really believe in it, and I was like, why do I have to say my problems? Like, I'm not the whole problem, but when you carry around that label of the black sheep, you think you're the whole problem. You don't realize, okay, there's yours, there's hers, and then there's the middle, and somewhere in the middle is, the 100% truth, but it's the two perspectives coming together that make it the challenge. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, how do you get the stuff in between and not really put the label on one or the other?
Gotcha.
So
that sounds complicated.
That's what I do for work now. Trying to get couples not to blame each other, but really look at the problems in between. It's not the husband that's problematic. It's not the wife that's problematic. It's all these things in between that are keeping them from connecting, right? And I believe we connect in 3 ways. We connect with God, we connect with ourselves, and we connect with each other. I think couples, when they're not connected to God or themselves, they try to connect with each other. But the problem is we need God, and we need to understand why we think the way we think and why we do the things we do. If we don't know, we're not aware of that, when we try to connect and we miss, we just get upset. And then we're going to either retract or we're going to project onto each other, and it's trying to figure out, okay, we're in this mess. How do we get here? A lot of times the couples, we got to fight over the smallest thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's the last thing, right? But it may be small, but there's this whole big thing underneaath that's just ready to.
Was it? They say that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The camel's back,
yeah, absolutely. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, what was underneath? What are all the things you're carrying? That's trying to uncover that. So I had to do that for myself, and I think that's what's helped me help others so well is by unpacking the work and knowing that I will always be doing the work.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a knucklehead. I still say things to my wife that I'm like, I gotta apologize. I'm like, I can't believe I said that. It's one of those things where we're always working. And I think that's what builds the connection, is when we're able to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I made a mistake. I need to apologize. That wasn't kind, or I misunderstood what you said and took it personal. Because a lot of times we're going to take it personal. And so it's recognizing, oh, I totally missed that.
That's good. That's good. I think a lot of people don't realize that their past plays a huge part in relationships, whether it's marriage or other relationships, work relationships even.
Oh, absolutely.
And unless and until you deal with the hurt and the shame and the things that you carried, and a lot of it, so much of it is from childhood. And if you don't deal with those, they're always going to interfere.
Yeah.
But it's a normal for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it when a couple comes to see me, I try to prepare them that we're going to talk about our childhood, because I tell them, I'm like, you got to present day somehow, some way. And you have these issues here, but we got to go backtrack. Like, we got to figure out, when your spouse says this, what does it trigger inside of you? And then let's go back. Can you recall earlier times in your life where that started? You know, where did that come from? It just didn't start here. It's a ongoing long line of hurt that you're carrying with you. But because you didn't resolve it back here, it's built up so much power that it's going, and you're taking it out on your spouse. And so what would happen if you actually forgave whoever hurt you the first time, and then you're not carrying all that weight anymore? What might happen? What might happen with your connection to your spouse? And so, you know, just offering that as an opportunity for them to, because when the light bulb clicks, it's like, wait, wow, and that's true freedom of recognizing we don't have to keep carrying that.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, hey, why not surrender it to the Lord? Like, lay it at his feet. That's what he died for. So, you know, we can be forgiven. We can forgive others, and we don't have to carry that anymore. That's what he says. Leave your burdens at my feet. And so I was like, okay, what would that look like? How might we do that? And giving them tools and strategies to be able to do that. So then when they look at their spouse, they're not looking at their mom or their dad. They're looking at their spouse.
Right. And forgiveness is huge. If you've been following us at all, you know that we speak a lot about forgiveness. And what I find interesting, though, is this is a new aspect, is that you can forgive your spouse. But if it's something that is triggered from years ago, and you don't forgive the person that was the culprit at that point, it's going to keep coming.
Absolutely.
And coming.
Absolutely.
And you're going to have to keep asking your spouse for forgiveness.
Right.
You know, you've got to get back to the root. It's that whole root thing.
It's the root thing. If we don't get to the root, it's not worth doing. And that's what I tell clients all the time. I'm like, we have to go to the root, because otherwise you'll be in this cycle for the rest of your life. And you're going to blame them for things that somebody else did.
Right.
And so it's recognizing there's a difference between the two. And that's the hard thing, because, you know, our culture is so big on feelings, which I'm all about feelings and being able to feel what comes up. The thing is that present day feelings are exactly old day feelings. And so but if we don't mindfully make a difference between the two, then we're going to just treat them as the same. Does that make sense? And so it's recognizing, we feel this way, but how much more information do we have present day that we didn't have when we were 10 or 11 or 12, right? So let's just say our spouse rejects us. Let's say we want to be intimate and our spouse says no. But then we hear no, and then we think about, well, I remember when I asked that girl to dance with me and she said no, and that hurt me so bad, and I thought that was the end of my world. Or she said no in front of all these people, and then it just felt like this big. We're carrying the same no rejection, those feelings, into our spouse saying no.
Isn't that interesting? So you really have to become aware of what you're thinking. And that's another thing we talk a lot about too, is it's not just you live life. You've got to be intentional about, okay, what's not working? How come it's not working?
Right.
And sometimes you need to sit down with somebody like Jeff to figure that out, because it's important.
Yeah. It's one of those things where if we don't ask the question, or if we can't pause long enough, a lot of times people are so reactive. They hear no and boom, they're already saying something. But it's pausing, like being able to take a bigger picture. Like, let's say your spouse says no, they don't want to be intimate. Well, it's been a long day. They've been with the kids. They've just put them down to bed. They're tired, that sort of thing. Oh, yeah, they're not saying no to me. They're tired. I mean, they're saying no to me, but I'm taking it personal as if there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Right? That's the shame thing.
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing, no,
good.
they've had a long day. Okay, I understand. Not a big deal. Maybe tomorrow. maybe the next day, whatever. We'll schedule a day. That's another strategy we could do. We'll schedule a day, but when we take it personal, then we're going to react personal. And so then it's going to come with a long history of emotions that we have not healed from.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, let's go back to your story.
Okay.
Because as far as we know, you're
yes.
still angry and full of shame
yes.
and hurt. Where did you go from
that
point?
Was married the first time for about 8 years. Together, 6 of those. So like the last 2 were separated and then eventually divorced. Then, at the age of 30, asked God, and I started going to counseling myself. I knew that I needed to heal what I was carrying, and
So
I
you
knew
were
I couldn't.
aware.
Oh, I was very aware. I knew there was. I just knew I was hurting, and I was actually an undergrad at the time, because back then I wanted to be a teacher and a football coach, and so I was doing undergrad work and had no idea I was going to go into counseling yet, and it, at the school that I went to was a Christian school. They had a counseling available for us, and so went there, saw a therapist for about a year, and started uncovering all these things that I had been carrying through childhood, and realized, wow, I've been I've been doing life. I don't want to say wrong, but I definitely wasn't doing it to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And I wasn't tapping into the gifting that God gave me. And I realized that I just put on the face and I just put on the facade in order to be accepted.
Yeah.
And so is recognizing, man, am I really being authentic and genuine? Or am I just trying to be what everybody else wants me to be?
That's that people-pleasing thing.
The people-pleasing thing. And so I really had to learn how to set boundaries. I really had to learn how to be able to say no to the things that I really didn't want to do, that I used to say yes to, just to make other people happy, or really a lot of the time was not to fight or deal with it. The irony is that I'd end up fighting worse because I didn't say anything, and then it would just build up, right? And so it was one of those things where by the time it got to that point that I can say, hey, that's a great, thank you for offering, but it's not going to work for me, or that's not something that I'm interested in. And being okay to set that boundary and know that I was worth saying no to. I have the power to say no, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If I let somebody down, that part's not mine to take on. Where growing up in a home where that used to be, I used to have to make sure mom was okay. I used to have to make sure she was happy. I used to have to make sure that she was taken care of. In my home, it was all about mom. And so it was recognizing that I have a place at the table, and it's not the black sheep. It's actually a nice, caring man who cares about people and who loves the Lord with all his heart. And so it's sharing that with other people and tapping into that. And that's over that year, I just tap more into it, and then started reading the Bible and growing my relationship with the Lord, and the intimacy with the Lord is just kept growing and growing and growing. And then eventually he's like, well, guess what? I was like 2 classes away from finishing undergrad, and he's like, you're going to go into graduate school and do counseling. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a lot more than I anticipated. So, but by going through that process myself, it wasn't overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was something that I'm like, well, I've healed a ton. It would be nice to help other people and facilitate and help other people and give them the tools to recognize you don't have to stay stuck there. There's hope. One, obviously in the Lord, but then 2, if you understand how you got to this point, then you can go backwards and really heal or undo a lot of the things that you're doing now that aren't healthy, or that aren't making strong connections with your spouse or your kids or your coworkers. So you don't have to walk around with the label, the black sheep.
Yeah.
You can actually walk around with hope, with grace and compassion and love in your heart, and share that with the people around you.
Or any other label.
Any other label. Yeah. Whatever it is that you feel that applies to you. I feel if it's on the negative side, I'm trying to figure out, okay, when did that start? Where did that start? And how do we undo it and replace it with something that I believe God has for you?
Well, let's go ahead and talk about where you came from after that point of, forgiveness. You're in school, you're changing direction, and you're heading now where it's really interesting to me that he would be heading to helping people, especially when they're the ones that have hurt you. So
Right.
how did you make that adjustment from, I know it was a Lord thing, but how did
For
it go
sure.
from, I can't stand these people, I don't want to be hurt by people, to you're actually going now to school to learn how to help people?
Well, I think I found that my strength was to be vulnerable and sharing my story and the pain that I was experiencing. And so the Lord led a lot of men that were having difficulties in their marriages my way, and I would just spend time with them. And he was having me read different books. And this is all before I got into graduate school. And I'm like, what? Lord, why am I reading these books? It doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm going through a divorce. Like, why would I have to read these books? And it made sense once he said, oh yeah, you're going to go into graduate school. So, but it was one of those things I started to recognize. It wasn't the people that hurt me. It was what I was hanging on to that hurt me. And so
Say that again. That's good.
It wasn't the people that hurt me. It were the things that I hung on to that hurt me. So the feelings, the emotions, the things that they did. And so once I started forgiving them, then it was easy as like, it took the weight off. It took the weight off them, and especially took the weight off me.
Yeah.
Because now I could look at them and not hold them responsible for the things they did and said. I still had a healthy boundary, but it wasn't like, oh, I don't like you.
Yeah.
It totally flipped the other way. And when the Lord gets a hold of your heart, it's like you love everybody, and it's with healthy boundaries, because I know people are like, no, I can't love it. With healthy boundaries, you can still love everybody. You can still pray for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the other part. When you start praying for people, it just changes your heart.
It
and
does.
so people didn't scare me anymore because I realized now what God had for me.
Yeah.
And if I was going to go in the helping field, I wanted to be healthy and healed. I didn't want to go into the helping field hoping that would help me heal, because I saw a lot of people do that too. And so I went in, already in the healing process. I believe that we're always healing, but I went in there in the healing process. And so the things that would, used to trigger me didn't trigger me anymore, or they didn't trigger me to the level that it used to. And that's what, working with couples, I say, we're still going to get triggered. The goal is to reduce the reaction. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and how we know the difference between present day and let's say 10 years ago is if we become hysterical, chances are it's historical. So if in the moment we get really excited, we have these big feelings and we don't know like what just happened, it like happened so quickly, chances are it's historical and it has nothing to do with the situation or the person you're in. No, they might have said something that rubbed you wrong, but to have a big response to it, there's got to be more underneath. And so it's recognizing that the more I prayed for people, the more I healed, the big hysterics of the hurt started to reduce. And so that allowed me to be relational and love people through grace and compassion rather than keep them at a distance.
I love it. So really, a lot of it came out of forgiveness. It was
Absolutely.
basically a forgiveness heart that you had to have. And I've shared this many times. I've had to forgive people and I haven't wanted to.
Yeah.
And I've literally said, Lord, I forgive, help my unforgiveness. We have to at least be willing to do what God wants us to do. Yeah. And if it takes a minute, it's okay.
Absolutely.
It can be a process. It's not always a one and done, I forgive you. It can take a while.
It could take a while. And it might be over and over again. It's one of those things where I thought I forgave them. And then something else happens. It's like, oh, they got me mad again. It's like, well, we have to forgive.
Yeah.
It's or we might remember certain things a parent or a sibling did to us. And it just comes out of the blue. Well, we have to forgive that.
Yeah.
Right? That's our minds bringing to surface something that we need to let go of. And so, maybe that's God bringing that to your attention and be like, hey, you need to forgive them for that thing. Because if we have a big reaction or if we have a significant reaction, chances are it's in our past.
That's
and
good.
so
That's good.
what do you need to surrender to the Lord? Even with our spouses, like, why they keep doing that thing? It's like, okay, what part are you going to take responsibility for so you don't have this big reaction? Are they allowed to do that thing? Is it hurting you or does it just bother you? It's a big difference, right? And so what bothers me? Okay.
Get over it. For a minute.
I don't do that, but it's one of those things where, okay, we got to figure out, why does it bother me so much?
Yeah.
And really, if we unpack that, it's going to go to something in our past. It will absolutely connect to something.
That's good.
Like, oh, I haven't thought about that in so long.
Yeah.
But you're taking it out on them.
That's good.
So.
Well, we probably have a spouse of a couple, one person of the two. Typically, how many of us sit down and watch a podcast or listen to a radio show and it's both of us together, husband and wife. What do you tell somebody who is coming to you by themselves? There is an issue with both of them, but one is hearing it and receiving it, the other maybe is not.
Yeah. Patience is going to be key in everything you do. Creating a place that will invite vulnerability, so not being critical of your spouse, because sometimes it lands with one and not with the other, and it takes a little bit longer for one than the other. A lot of times one spouse wants it more than the other, and so they'll do the work and they'll do all the things. And the other spouse is kind of like, kind of like I was when I went in my first marriage. And so it's one of those things where if we're patient enough and we create an environment that's different than when we started, then maybe the spouse that's kind of dragging will want to step into that realm, because when they know if their spouse is changing, right? If their spouse is doing the things that they're being coached to do, and they're actually creating an environment that's more inviting than what they're coming from or what they had started with, then they're going to be like, okay, there might be something to this thing, And so then it's really taking responsibility. Each spouse has to take responsibility for their part. And so when they start taking responsibility for their part, then it's going to naturally change you.
Yeah.
Because you're going to realize, oh, I keep reacting to this thing they say and do, or I keep doing this and I keep doing that. How can I shift into showing up differently? What might that look like? And would that encourage my spouse to come into that, do that dance with me that, maybe they'll want to be present with? And so I always say softer, slower, kinder, more patient. That is always going to be the route to go. If we're being critical, nagging, controlling, I don't know about you, but I don't like that kind of behavior, or being told certain things. So I'm going to be like, nope, push the brakes on that guy. So
yeah. So let's go back to your story. You graduated and you became a...
I did, but before that, so 2 years after going through the divorce, I met my wife, Veronica, and
sweetheart that she is.
She is. She's beautiful too.
You are a lucky guy. I'm just saying.
I am. And so we did the Brady Bunch. I don't know, you're familiar with the show Brady Bunch? Okay, so Brady Bunch, she had 2 daughters, I had 2 boys. Did the Brady Bunch merger. That was a challenge, right?
Sure.
Blending families. I learned a lot through that, blending families. And I will say, if you're blending a family and you don't have any kids together, buy a dog. I'm
buy
serious.
a dog.
It worked. Brooklyn.
Oh, really?
Brooklyn brought our family together, because it was
now, who is Brooklyn?
Brooklyn was our miniature Schnauzer that we had, and so it was everybody's dog. And so everybody got to play with her. And she was really Veronica's dog, but everybody else, it was our dog.
Yeah.
And so I felt like that gave us the common ground.
Oh, that's good.
We moved into the house after we got married. So had the house, everybody the kids shared a room. It was fun. It was a lot of learning.
And you're laughing.
I learned a lot, because I realized I can have a place as stepdad. I don't have to be dad. And that stepdad allowed me to be more along the lines of a friend. And so and build an individual, authentic connection with them, with the girls. And so, so much so that my youngest stepdaughter went into marriage and family therapy, and she does therapy now. So,
Wow.
shout out to Sam. But yeah, it's one of those things where you can have that. It takes work. Like
Yeah.
you have to pursue and be intentional with those relationships. And you have to give a lot of space because, kids are coming from, there's a lot of hurt going through a divorce and not knowing, where they stand with the parents and that sort of thing. So, blended the family and did all that. And I think after we were married for 3 or 4 years, I graduated. I graduated in grad school in 2014. So I had started grad work in 2013 and been doing it ever since. So, yeah, the more I think about it, the blending of the family, that was there's a lot of learning in that, a lot of patience and grace and compassion. And then, co-parenting with
Yeah.
there's a lot in there. That's a lot of growth, and there was a lot of times where Veronica and I would be talking about certain things and, because we want to raise the kids one way and, the other home wants to raise them another way. And we both have the best intention for our kids.
Yeah.
It's just different ways of going about it. And so it's, picking and choosing where we're going to stand our ground and, and then making sure that our kids feel loved.
Yeah.
Though we have each other, Veronica and I do, we still love them. And that was one of the things that we had talked about is our kids, I don't know how popular this is, but our kids will always come first as the parent to kids. We were going to come second in our marriage to each other. And I say that loosely because we knew where we stood with each other, but we had the best intention for our kids because they didn't ask for their parents to go through a divorce. And so there's a fine line there, but it's just making them feel heard and validated. And then we can have our discussion after, even if we don't see on the same page. We were strong enough to have that discussion afterwards, and we weren't, making a big scene about it in front of them. And so it's one of those things where we wanted our kids to feel loved and nurtured and validated through high school. My boys were younger, so grade school and that sort of thing. So.
Well, it's a big thing to think about because when you recognize that more than 50% of marriages end in divorce, so many of those man and wife, they have kids, and there are a lot of lost kids, at least for a period of time until they settle into a new family unit. And that's a whole other relationship situation that you have going on in a family. Never mind the husband and wife relationship and the kid relationship. And once you add in step families to that, that's just a whole other ball game, really. I've heard that. Of course, we've been married a very long time. We're ancient. And so we've not experienced that, but we're very familiar, having talked to many people about that. There's just a period of time where it's, who's who and why and where and really that you have to go through.
That was the reason why I didn't want to have any more kids after going through a divorce. And I was like, well, we could do the dog. Like, dog, that's the next best thing.
Do the dog.
But it was just definitely, I was like, I just knew God didn't want me to have any more kids because I wanted to focus on my boys, And I mean, that was the focus after going through the divorce anyway, is to make sure that the impact, Dad was always going to be there. I mean, so much so that I relocated in Southern California to another county just to be close to them because their mom had moved to another county. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to stay close. I'm not going to be a weekend dad or every other weekend dad. I'm going to be an everyday dad. I want to coach my kids' sports. I want to pick them up from school. I want to be a part of their life. I didn't want to
That's awesome.
be a statistic of like, I see them every other weekend.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't going to do that.
That's awesome.
So
if we can go back to what we were talking about, you had to forgive people to get free of that shame and the pain. And now you're, graduated from grad school, you're married, and you have 2 kids, and then you're remarried, and now you have an extra 2 kids and a dog. Let's not forget the dog.
Brooklyn,
So are you able to see a pattern of the goodness that is in you instead of all these things that are pulling inside of you as you've progressed through life?
Yeah, I mean, you could ask my sisters or my kids, like they'll tell you there's definitely a difference between the old guy and the guy that they have now. And it is a lot more fun to be me.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
cool.
it's I like to have fun. I like to enjoy people. I'm a extrovert, so I like talking to people and just connecting with people. And it's given me the freedom to do that and not care what people think. You not care
There's freedom in that.
not care what conclusion they come to about me, because I know who I am. I know who I am in the eyes of the Lord, and I know what I bring to the table. And especially, with my heart, like I care about people. And so it's just giving me the freedom to be stepdad, to be dad, to be husband, and to love people the way that I know I can love them, and do that on a daily basis. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. That's
Yeah.
what makes me human.
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing waking up with that kind of heart is intentional. We
that's
get to
good.
choose. We could either choose to live by our guilt and shame, or we could live through grace and compassion. At the end of the day, it's what we believe about ourselves that drives that. That core belief will drive whether, am I still the black sheep, or am I, a son that the Lord loves, right? Does he take joy in watching me connect with people? And so it's, which one am I going to choose? And that's the choice. And so when you go through the healing process and go through forgiving people, forgiving yourself, what happens is you start to see life through that light that the Lord wants you to see it through. And he gives you opportunities to step into your gifting and the things that he gave you,
Yeah.
and be able to use those to connect people to him. Because that's what it's all about, right? And so I work with couples hoping that, my hope is that their relationship will be a blessing to other people. And I tell them all the time, I say, you think this is about you, and it is. You're paying for it, and you're investing in this opportunity to grow relationally stronger. But the ripple effect that's going to happen, your testimony is going to share, is going to be able to share with so many people, and it's going to connect with them. And they're going to understand certain things, and they're going to be able to relate. And then you'll be like, hey, I see this thing in you. What about you? What about forgiveness for you? And then watch how you're just changing, communities and churches and people that are hurting and struggling. And so I all the time I tell them, I'm like, it's not just about you. It's about you, but what impact you're going to have because of it. Because once you start tasting that freedom, then you want to share it with everybody.
Yes.
It's not something you want to keep to yourself, right? It's like the good news. Like you just want to tell everybody about it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we know you have office hours.
Yes.
What else are you doing?
So last year I started a group for men. It's called Battleground, Building Relational Champions. And it's based.
Very He-Man-ish.
Well, I wanted to sound masculine, but
It does.
I mean, I'll probably do that with couples moving forward. But it's giving men a place to really be seen and heard, have a place where they can get vulnerable. And I lead through vulnerability. So I share my story. I share some details I didn't share here. And that opens up the door to allow other men to do the same thing. Once it's modeled, and once they see that you're allowed to feel this way, chances are they're going to step into that. And I've created a 6-week curriculum to be able to do that. And it's really empowering them to share their story and have a voice and understand, like, how did I get to this place? Why do I do the things that I do? So when my kid acts up, or when my wife says something, like, why do I have this big reaction? And so it's really breaking it down and really understanding that they brought stuff with them. And they guys usually surface level, like they'll talk about, yeah, well, my dad this and he did that, and well, I had this happened. It's not a big deal, but it is, right? And so we know that, and so it's recognizing, how do we uncover that it's a big deal, and then what can we do to start the healing process and the forgiveness process, and what might that look like? And so, just doing that with 5 or 6 guys in the 6-week process, and doing it in person, and creating that environment where they can be vulnerable. It's been a tremendous blessing, and I'm grateful for the men that have said yes, and watch them grow because of it. And, and that's just like scratching the surface. So I probably will come out with a couple other groups of like advanced groups to really do deeper dives into their past and, how to do more healing in that realm.
How can folks find out about that?
I got a website, www.lovebiglovewide.com. They can check out, they can get in contact with me there. They can go to Jeff Ortiz, LBLW on Instagram. And then Facebook is just Jeff Ortiz.
All right. And so women can sign their husbands up with that link?
No, please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Not a good plan.
Please don't ever do that. Yeah. You can do that with anybody else, just not with me. Yeah. I don't want to get, no, not fair.
But I like what you said, for the women, if there's a problem there, that they can start changing themselves,
Absolutely.
Whether it's a man or a woman. Just start working on themselves until that switch is moving and the light is flashing a little bit.
Yeah, because the man's, he's going to see. He's going to see there's something different. So I will say, if you nag your husband or you critique him or tell him what he's not good at, if you start sharing what he is good at and what you're proud of him for, that's going to change some things. Women have a lot of power. You all have a lot of power. Like,
can we do another show?
If you can start telling your husband how grateful you are for him and how thankful you are, and you start expressing that on a daily basis, I guarantee you he will change. First of all, he's going to be like, what do you want? Like,
right.
he's going to suspect that there's something underneath. But it's one of those things where you can create the change by what you focus on. And if you're focusing on what he brings to the table as opposed to what he doesn't, and this goes both ways, then chances are they're going to want to do more of that, because now they're getting some sort of reward for it, right? So praise or acknowledgement. And so it's like, okay, I want to do more of that. If it's making them happy, then I want to do more of that.
That's good. So it doesn't have to be, if a husband and wife don't want to come together, it doesn't have to be that they come together to see some changes.
Yeah, they can come separately, and we can give them tools and strategies to shift that, and always keep the door open. Like, hey, I'm going to go. Do you want to come? No. Okay. Eventually down the road, we've started the process. If you want to enter into it, you're more than welcome to. But more than anything, as the individual, we can always grow and heal and, change the dynamic of the relationship, and our partner doesn't have to go. That's what I believe. But, when we got a couple, there's two sides to everything. Yeah. So it would be beneficial to have both partners there. But we can certainly get the ball rolling by going by ourselves.
That's good. So you meet people in person, and you also meet them online.
Online,
so
yes.
You can meet somebody from anywhere.
I have,
in the world.
All over.
Cool. Well, folks, this has been I believe it's been really helpful. We talked about the things that are inside, whether it's what people have put on us or things that we have taken and just come up with ourselves. They don't have to stay there. They don't have to be part of how we're living our life. We can change. And a lot of times, change happens when we forgive people.
That's right. It will definitely change you when you start forgiving people.
And don't quit, right?
Always keep going. Don't stop.
You're still doing stuff, aren't you, for yourself?
Always. I'm always doing the work, because it's never ending.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, thank you. Appreciate you being here, Jeff.
We
didn't even get to talk about little Jeff. Oh, you've got to go see him in person, because there is a little Jeff. And
yeah, come see me in person. You see little Jeff.
Yeah.
I like that.
I love little Jeff. He's so cute, and he does his own thing. Well, he doesn't really do his own thing, but, he has a message that he shares. I should stop now. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Y'all contact him if you have a reason to, or if you know somebody that could benefit from a little chat with Jeff. Let them know about him and how they can reach him. You all have a great week. We'll see you next time.